Hi there, I'm Cary Ellis, author of 21st Century Superhuman. This is our 21st Century Superhuman show. And Vivek is here with me tonight to do a show on doing nano-coating in kind of an urban setting. And so we have some really exciting information on that. But Vivek, thank you for that. I say also that one of the reasons that we do these shows, that I do these shows, is because there are so many people interested, hungry, and ready to learn. And we want to encourage every single person who has the interest and the inclination and maybe a little space at home you can do it, to put into practice these tools, because we are on the brink of implementing a new technology in the world, and it has the capability of leading us into a kind of freedom that we've not had for thousands of years. That includes free energy, includes food for all, includes a kind of abundance that we're really designed to live in on planet Earth. So the reason that we do these videos is to teach you what are the simple ways that you can do this at home. And this tool that you have today, Vivek, to share is certainly one of those. It's something anybody can do anywhere. And it's really wonderful. And there are so many aspects to this that are simple, from health pens and health pads to making the coils for a Magrav power unit, or for a car or motorcycle, or different health devices that are also being made. I also just made an amazing show today on food GANS, which is just totally cool and amazing. So the encouragement is to say, please, get out there and try something. Put some of this to work, because the way that this is getting spread is by something called open source, by us sharing it with one another. And that's what these videos are about. These videos are teaching videos. They are to give you, in a small nutshell, so you don't have to watch all the trainings, give you the opportunity to learn so you can put this into practice at home. So Vivek, let's explain to start with, because we're going to talk about nano-coating, what nano-coating is and why we would use it. Do you want to go ahead with that?
Okay. Nano-coating is a way of transforming matter to become plasma superconductive. We need to remember that plasma is the energy that's around us. This is the energy that we are harnessing. This is the energy that we would like to use in different ways. For health devices, for energy devices, and so on and so forth. However, in the matter state, plasma is, you're not giving a conducive environment for plasma to flow through. So what we do is we take the matter state, for example, copper, and we introduce it into a different environment where the copper itself can transform on the surface to a nano layer. And for example, I can even show you this. This is a set of coils that I made very early on, and as you can see, it's black. It's no longer copper colored.
These are beautiful.
This is the black coating, which is the nano coating itself. So what we're doing is we're taking matter state and we are transforming it into a plasma superconductive state. This is the purpose of nano coating.
And so literally what we're doing is expanding the molecular structure, or the atomic structure, on that outer layer of the copper, so that there, as Carl always likes to say, it's making up the atomic structure like popcorn. But by opening that atomic structure up, we're loosening it up from that denser 3D state so that the plasma energy can flow into it. And I love that. It's very cool.
Yeah, in fact, that is a very good analogy, because if you were to take the kernels of corn, that's not very palatable when you try to eat it. But when you introduce it into a different environment where that kernel pops and becomes popcorn, now it's much more palatable. It's much easier to eat. So all we're doing is something similar with the matter state. Matter state itself is not very palatable to the conductance of plasma. So all we're doing is we are taking the molecular structure of the matter, we are puffing it up like popcorn, we're making it more palatable so that it not just becomes conductive, but it becomes superconductive to the plasma that's around us.
Beautiful, Vivek. Great description. I love that. And so we use the nano coating on copper we use nano coating in so many ways, and I kind of run out of ways of it, but basically to make the coils for the Magrav power unit, to make the coils for a car. Those are beautiful coils that you have there too, by the way. And what is that?
That's the health pen. That also uses coils, and it is also nano-coated, as you can see right there.
Beautiful. And so that's 2 coils, right? One inside the other, and a straight pin inside of that?
This one has 4.
Oh, 4. Bueno, good.
This one, it's actually much more powerful. No, actually, this one has 3, and this one has 4.
Beautiful.
So I've been experimenting with different configurations. The 4 would be the more powerful equivalent of the 2, because now you're creating a much stronger magnetic gravitational field. So I've just been experimenting with different configurations.
Nice. And so one of the reasons that you don't touch those pens and you have them encased in plastic is because your personal energy and the oils from your skin would imprint into the nano coating, and you want to keep the nano coating clean, right?
That's right. The idea here is to have the nano coating as clean as possible so that it is able to conduct the plasma that's around us, so that when, let's say, for example, if you were to use the health pen on someone else, what you would be doing is giving them what they need and removing what they don't need using plasma. However, if this is coated with your amino acids, then that's going to create a different condition. It's going to give them something that they do need, but with your signature on it. And that may or may not be ideal. So we keep it as clean as possible.
So that's very nice. So, and the reason those are beautiful coils that you had, by the way. And so I know those are your kind of sample coils that you can hold up and look at that you're touching. But if you were actually making them for a unit, you would probably be wearing gloves to hold them or whatever.
I would. These are the very, very first set of coils that I made. That's why, I'm okay with touching them. But if it was something that I was making for someone else, I would be wearing gloves. I would not be handling the nanomaterial directly.
And so Vivek, also, I know some people are actually using a copper pin in some of the health pads that has been nano-coated. Trying to think if there's any other uses for nano-coating. Anything else you can think of that we're not hitting right this second?
Well, there are a myriad of reasons that one would nano-coat. And right now we are just beginning to scratch the surface of what's possible. So as we go along, we would come into understanding that's even better, and we would understand when to nano-coat, when to keep it as a matter state, and so on and so forth. For example, the health units that are vertically standing with the coils on it, that Mr. Keshe has taught, even the perspex that holds the coils in place, they are nano-coated. The frame of the whole thing is nano-coated because we want that entire structure to be a plasma conductive state. We do not want it to just be in a matter state.
And sometimes we'll even nano-coat wood by, for instance, coating it with ash maybe. And so there's other ways. There's natural nano-coatings, and ash is one really nice one. We can also make a caustic out of ashes that can be used for nano-coating, and even putting copper out in the sun and the seawater can literally nano-coat it, as we had our beautiful friend Libby has shown us on one of the videos that we did with some of her natural nano-coating methods. So I know you're going to talk about a couple of methods today, and we might talk too just for a minute of where we would get copper that we would be nano-coating, either to make the wire, or I know some of the guys are taking like a copper pipe and cutting it and hammering it out into a flat plate, or just using the tube itself. But getting really good copper wire, where would you get that?
Well, I get mine from Japan.
Wow.
I mean,
Lucky you, you're in Singapore, right?
I'm in Singapore, but I still have to buy it from Japan because I can get copper wire locally, but I need to buy it in bulk, a spool of 300 kilograms at one go. And I don't have any use for 300 kilograms of copper wire, and I don't have any place to store it over here. So I buy it in rolls of 1 kilogram each from Japan, and I buy it online and I ship it over. In the States, it should be quite easy to buy copper wire online. You will be looking at 14 gauge copper wire or thinner, depending on the applications, but usually we use 14 gauge wire. And the wire itself cannot be coated with anything else. It cannot have an enamel coating. So for example, the copper wires that they use for motors, electromagnetic motors, those are not suitable because the enamel coating would need to be sanded off first before the wire can be used. It needs to be bare, single core copper wire.
And so I know that making the note of the difference between the plain copper wire and the stuff that has the coating on it, I think here in the States, a lot of times, like if you're getting it at Home Depot or something, you've almost got to get the kind that has plastic on it, and that guarantees that it doesn't have the shiny coating on it. So I know especially as a woman who I'm less educated as far as metals and what this is and what that is, I've had to really do a lot of hunting to look for the right thing. And so any other tips on, do you think a lot of the wire that you would buy, can you buy bare copper wire without any plastic coating on it? Nice. And that's 14 gauge generally.
14 gauge generally. In fact, if you buy the bare copper wire without any insulation on it, it should be cheaper because it costs money to put the insulation on the copper wire itself. But if the copper wire is bare, then it should be a bit cheaper.
So Vivek, 14 gauge is usually what we're using in the Magrav units, et cetera, because isn't it 14 gauge wiring in a house usually? So you're kind of matching that.
Yeah, you're matching the amperage requirements of electricity. But honestly speaking, because we're working at the nano level, 14 gauge isn't really required. It's just much easier to work with.
So would you make it out of like a health pen? Would you make it out of a lighter wire than 14 gauge, or you would like maybe go to 16 or 18, or is that too light?
You could. It really depends on how you like to work. I mean, what you're comfortable working with. I'm very, very comfortable working with 14 gauge wire. In fact, the health pen that I showed you just now, if you can see, this is made of 14 gauge and it is hand rolled.
Nice.
I did not use a machine to roll this. It was all done by hand. So, 14 gauge, I can still hand work it without breaking my wrists. So
nice.
It works for me.
And in a lot of, it's really nice to make a coil with a drill and mechanically coil it. I'm still struggling with the drill to get a really good coil made, but and I've also wound a lot by hand as well. So, and in some countries, people might not have a choice, but you can do this anywhere. They can be wound by hand. They can be wound with a drill, depending on a person's mechanical access and mechanical ability, right?
Correct.
But even a child could wind a health pen pretty easily around a pencil or a rod of some sort, knitting needle.
This is one of my mandrels. It's a
Nice.
Sharpie.
Nice.
So for my 4 coil, the outermost coil needs to be quite big. It needs to have a big diameter. So I use this.
Nice.
This is 14 millimeters. So it works out it works out beautifully.
Simple everyday stuff. That's what I like about this. And
Yeah.
coming up, knitting needles come in all kinds of sizes. I used to have a whole collection of them. I don't anymore, but they'd be easy enough to grab, especially from the
Yeah.
feminine standpoint,
Yeah, even long screwdrivers as well, that could be used as a mandrel. There are many things that you could use. You could go to the metal stockist and buy rods, which we know as rolling stock. You could buy rods and use that as mandrels. You could use knitting needles. You could use Sharpies. You could use chopsticks, for example.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. All right, so you're going to teach us how to nano coat, and really, you're in an urban setting, and
Yeah.
you require just kind of simple things. You're not out on a farm or with a big shop, and so this is wonderful. And we're really doing this show at a request from one of our followers, James Triplett, and I want to say thank you, James. You're always giving us great suggestions. He's up in Minnesota, and he's always writing to me saying, Cary, would you do a show on this? And ask Vivek this question. So we always like getting, hearing from everybody what is really helpful. That helps us know what to bring to you. So take it away, Vivek, and show us how to rock and roll with doing this nano coating.
Okay. The very, very first step of nano coating, if you would go back to the videos of the Keshe Foundation, specifically what Armand has shown us is the caustic bath. So what you would do,
and I can put the link to that video under this video.
That's right. So what you would effectively do is you would take a container that looks like this. All right, it's a standard plastic box. I bought this from IKEA. And what you would do is you would put the items to be nano coated in the box. But before you put it into the box, you would put some caustic flakes at the bottom of the box itself. Then you would set these items in there, and you would take the cover of the box and place it on the box such that you leave a very, very small opening, like something like that. Okay, boil a kettle of water, and once the water comes to boil, and you must be very, very careful when you do this, do it in a well ventilated area, and do it where the wind is blowing away from you. So what you do is you take that kettle of boiling water and you pour the water into the box. The caustic would start to boil over. You need to make sure that you cover all of the items with the water. So the items need to sit inside the caustic water for 24 hours. This is the very first step.
And Vivek, when we say you're going to sprinkle caustic in the bottom of that, caustic in the United States would be called 100% lye, and you can buy it at a plumbing supply in a hardware store, whatever,
Right.
most places.
Yeah, you could even look on Amazon. They should have it. Sodium hydroxide. You could mix nine parts sodium hydroxide with 1 part potassium hydroxide. That's also another option. But you can go with pure sodium hydroxide as well. That's fine. Okay.
Yeah,
but
I've heard of the potassium hydroxide, adding that to it, but I've never done that part. So I've always
I've
just
never done it myself either. So
Yeah.
it's just information out there for those who do have access to potassium hydroxide. You can do it in that way. But the ratio is 9 parts sodium hydroxide to 1 part potassium hydroxide. So you would do that, and you would set it aside, and you would leave it for 24 hours. After 24 hours, now this is where you need to know exactly what it is that you're nano coating and what it is going to be used for. For items like this, which is the coil for the Magrav's unit, what you would do is you would take it out and you would hang it up and you would dry it for another 24 hours. Okay? You would dry it for another 24 hours. And then what you would do is you would take a digital multimeter like this. You would set it into the millivolt setting, as you would see over here. This is millivolts DC, all right? And you would then use this to drain the coils, okay? So, for example, this is the output lead of the coil itself, this over here. And this is the input lead right here, all right? This is the input lead. So what you would do is that the output lead would be connected to the positive, which is the red of the multimeter. You touch it over here with the red, and on the input lead, you would touch it with the black lead from the multimeter. So what you're doing is you're creating a circuit in series, and you are aligning the nano layers accordingly, such that it follows the flow. This is important for a coil in the Magrav's unit because you want the plasma to flow in a very, very coherent way around the coil.
Wow,
right?
that's really interesting. I hadn't become familiar with that step, Vivek. And in JC had told me in the nano-coating process, if I have hardware cloth in the bottom of my box or my container, that I'm doing that first bath in. And then after I pour the caustic water off, and I usually pour it down a drain to help keep my drains clear and to not put it in the earth or anything. But then he said I could just take a fork or spoon and hold it against the coils and touch the hardware cloth, and it would discharge some of the whatever charge that's in there. But what you just said about
a simpler way to do it.
Huh?
That's actually a simpler way to do it. What you would do is,
but it wouldn't get it flowing one direction like you said, would it?
It would, because what you're doing is effectively you are taking whatever whatever that is built up over here. You're taking an external ground, and you are causing the flow to go out from the output lead into the ground on the other side.
Okay,
So
cool.
it goes out this way.
Nice.
So there are many ways of doing it. What we need to do is, when we're doing this process, we need to think of the flow, how the flow happens within the structure itself. And once you understand how it's flowing, then you'll know that by grounding this lead to something else, you're going to align.
Cool. And I love simple. I love simple only because we want this to be able to be done by anyone in the world, whether they have, access to, what do you call that meter thing you were using?
It's a digital multimeter. You could
it's
use
like a volt, also called a voltmeter. Is that correct? Or
no, it can measure many readings: volts, amps, current, resistance, and so on and so forth.
Nice.
So that's why it's a digital multimeter.
Okay.
I mean, this is actually what I understand the most. It's the simplest for me. But now that you mentioned what John told you, that's even simpler. I had never thought of that before. But yeah, that's the way. That's another way you could do that. Now, let's keep in mind that alignment is needed for things like the Magrav's coils itself. But from my own experience, I found that I do not have to align the nano layers for things like the health pen or even plates that I'm using in my GANS kit. So for those things, I don't even bother to do this step. Okay? I don't even bother to do this step. What I do is, let's take this health pen, for example. The very first thing I did was to give it a caustic bath. Okay? It was submerged under caustic solution. Now, I took it out, and then I placed it on some kitchen towels. Let it drain
after 24 hours, right?
Doesn't have to be 24 hours. This was maybe about 15-20 minutes or so while I was getting the rest of the things ready to do the next round of nano coating.
Oh, but I mean, didn't you leave it in the caustic bath 24 hours?
I have to leave it in the caustic bath for 24 hours.
Then take it out. Go ahead.
Then I took it out. I put it on some kitchen towels, and I just left it there while I was preparing the other things for the next round of nano coating. The caustic solution that's inside this container, don't throw it away. Okay, this is going to be used for the next step of the nano coating. In fact, what I do is I take that caustic solution and I put it into a glass bottle like this. In fact, this is a glass bottle that I use to contain the caustic solution, as you can see.
That
Now,
is brilliant. Oh, I get where you're going with this. Cool. Vivek, are you still there? Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hey,
can you hear
Vivek,
me?
we lost you for just a second. Go ahead. I'll just cut that part out, but go ahead.
Okay, no worries. One thing you must remember is that when you're saving your caustic solution, never use plastic bottles unless you want to nano coat the contents of your kitchen cabinet. Ask me how I know.
Oh.
Don't use plastic bottles. Use a glass bottle like this, something with a gasket over here. So you would fill it up to about that much, and you would be able to secure the top of the bottle such that it becomes airtight. And even if you tip it over, nothing spills out. It's very secure. So use something like this.
Brilliant. I get where you're going with this. This is exciting.
Yeah. So you would pour the caustic from your container in here, and now you're going to start using the caustic from here. I'm going to show you what I do next using an egg steamer. Now, this is the egg steamer that I use. It's a very small egg steamer. It has double layers, which I'll show you in a short while. What you do is you use a scoop of some sort, and you pour your caustic solution in here such that you get that much of a level of caustic solution. Now, as you can see, the inside of this egg steamer, do you see all the bits in there? That's nano coating.
Nice. So maybe like a quarter to
Metal,
a half an inch deep in
yeah,
there.
the metal itself of the egg steamer becomes nano coated, but that's
Nice.
fine. You can always scrub this away with a little bit of green wool and dishwashing liquid. So what you do is you fill it about 3/4 full. You put the first layer onto the egg steamer itself, like that, and then you would place items in here. Okay, you would place the items in here that you want to nano coat. So I'm just giving an example like
And
this.
not in the
This
plastic, of course.
not in the plastic. It has
Right.
to be just the copper items. I'm not going
Right.
to take this out because I don't want to handle them directly. Now, because this is a double-decker egg steamer, I have the benefit of being able to nano coat a few items at the same time. Sorry about that. I can nano coat a few items at the same time. So, I put whatever I need to nano coat over there. I cover it up like that, and that's what it looks like. Now,
That is
this,
handy dandy. I like that.
yeah, it's very, very useful. In fact, this is actually big enough to be able to nano coat these coils over here, but sometimes it may not be able to. So I'll touch on that a little bit later on. Now there's a switch on this egg steamer. I leave it in the on position all the time. All I do is plug this in, turn on the main switch, and I leave this alone for about an hour and a half. So what will happen is the steamer would come up to temperature. It would create a caustic vapor environment for everything to sit in. Again, do this in a very ventilated place because there are ventilation holes over here. So you want to let it exhaust out. So you let it sit for about 1.5 hours, and this thing will turn itself on and off, on and off, on and off, bringing the caustic solution up to temperature. After about 1.5 hours, turn it off and leave it to sit for about 3 to 4 hours. Then what you do is you remove all the layers. You're left with a very, very dirty caustic solution over here. You pour that away. You wash it out with plain water. You pour more caustic into it, and you repeat the process. Each day, I do this 3 times. And I do this over the course of about 2 to 3 days, depending on how thorough I want my nano layer, how thick I want my nano layers to be. You don't have to do it for 3 to 4 days. You can get it done in about a day and a half. That is more than sufficient. But I like to go the extra mile. I like to do it over the course of 3 days.
And what's interesting, Vivek, do you think, because one of the ways that we can nano coat is also with a torch, right? So do you think
Right.
you're getting a little bit of that torch effect by putting it in the heat for several hours?
Not exactly. What you're doing is with the torch, you are creating that nano layer through the use of extreme heat, and you are also aligning the nano layer at the same time. You don't have to use a multimeter to do the alignment. Whereas with the caustic, okay, what you're doing is you are accelerating the caustic process using heat. What I'm going to show next is the slower process for items that are bigger that you need to nano coat that may not fit onto the egg steamer. Use the slower process. It takes about a week to do this, but the nano coating that comes out is absolutely beautiful. It comes
Nice.
out perfect, and it's very strong. It doesn't scratch off very easily. Okay, so this
Awesome.
is the process that I use with the egg steamer. After 3 days, you take all your items out and you wash them under water, and you just leave them out to dry. Let them dry as thoroughly as possible, and you're done. You're nano coated.
Yeah, I really like this, Vivek, just because it's kind of contained. And I think especially for people in a more urban setting who don't have shops and garages and they just have a simple, smaller space. Maybe they have a balcony or a deck or a back room that they can do it in so they're not breathing. Because you wouldn't want to be breathing the fumes if you can help it, right?
No, you do not want to breathe the fumes.
So you want to
Otherwise, you'd make a trip to the ER.
So you want to put it in a room or a balcony or an area where it's kind of isolated from your living space.
Correct. And what I do is I put it in the kitchen where it's right next to a window. The wind is always blowing out over there. So
Nice.
whatever fumes that come out of this get exhausted out the window. So it's perfectly fine.
Nice. Very good.
Okay. So that's what I do with the egg steamer. Now sometimes we are forced to nano coat items that are bigger that may not fit inside the egg steamer. I'm just using this as an example.
Or say
So
you had a dozen coils, because
yeah,
even what you have in your hand is, now did you nano coat that already put together, all 4 coils? Because you've got an inner coil with another coil inside that, and you have the outer coil with another coil inside that. So you have 4 coils right there. And
that's
so
right. All
you
of them
nano
was
coated that as a completely put together item, right?
correct.
And
So you put
even the
everything
ends were
together.
already twisted.
The ends were already twisted, and then I set them into the egg steamer to get nano coated. But in the event that you can't use an egg steamer, what I would suggest is using the cold caustic method. Now, there are a couple of ways that you could do it. You
And
could use,
if you were making a Magrav, for instance, you would have a triple of what you have there, and that might be hard to fit in the egg steamer. Or if you're making 2 Magravs at a time, you'd have, you know, multiples of that. And
yeah.
so good to know how to do it in a bigger space.
Okay, what we could do is one of 2 methods. You could use a sandwich baggie like this, something that you could seal. Okay, so what you would do is you would take the caustic that you saved from earlier on, and you would put it into a spray bottle like this. Now, when you're using caustic in a spray bottle like this, it becomes even more dangerous. So you must use face protection and eye protection. Do it in a well ventilated area where the wind is blowing away from you. So what you do is you would have the caustic in a spray bottle like this. You would open up your sandwich baggie. You would have your item inside the sandwich baggie, for example, like that. Just put it in for demonstration purposes, something like that. And then you would take this and you would spray down the inside of the sandwich baggie such that the whole inside of the baggie becomes very saturated with caustic vapor. And then you would seal it up and you would set it aside, and that's it. You would come back and you would inspect it once every day. And if you see a reduction in the amount of caustic vapor that's over there, just give it a couple more spritz of the caustic liquid from your spray bottle, seal it up again, and just leave it aside.
And a lot of people, like Dave in Peru, will take those and hang them in the sun.
Yep.
Clip them to like a line out in the sun or lay them out in the sun. So they're getting the heat from the sun on
Exactly.
top of.
Yeah. So, but for some of us who are living here in an urban environment where we don't exactly have access to an open area where we can hang it out under the sun, you could just leave it on your shelf. It would take about a week to finish the whole process, as opposed to hanging it under the sun. You could finish it off in about 3 or 4 days. So this is another option. If you don't want to use a sandwich baggie, go back to the box that you were using. Now, the only difference is that inside the box, you would need a little bit of a standoff, because you do not want the items to be resting at the bottom of the box. You want to give them a little bit of airspace underneath. So what you would do is you would make a standoff like this using chicken mesh or plastic mesh. You would put it at the bottom of the box, like so, okay? And then you would take the item that you wish to nano coat, if it would come out of the plastic bag. That's one issue with the plastic bag. Okay, here we go. So what you would do is you would take it and you would put it inside the box. You would spritz down, again, using the spray bottle. You would spritz down the sides of the box and the cover of the box with some caustic. If you want to, you could also have a very, very, very thin layer of caustic over here. You could use a scoop from the caustic that you had collected earlier and just pour it in. And then you would cover it up and you would leave it aside for, again, about 6 to 7 days. And every day you would just come back, you would check it out, give it a couple of squirts of caustic more, and that's how you would nano coat it. At the end of the 7 days, you would take it out and you would dry it, and your items are nano coated.
And Vivek, I've had people that I work with use an old Pyrex container. So it was more of a glass type of container with a tight fitting glass lid. And that maybe they had sitting around or they got at the thrift store or something like that.
That would work as well. That would work. So
fantastic.
That's how you do your nano coating.
That is great.
There's one more thing I forgot to mention. You could nano coat your coils in the same way for your Magrav's unit. Now, the only thing with the coils is that every 6 to 8 hours, you would need to do the nano layer alignment with the multimeter or with the method that John taught, by grounding it out with a fork or a spoon. So every 6 to 8 hours, you would come back to the container and you would align the nano layer. And then you would close it up and then off you go. And you would do that over the course of a few days. However long nano coat.
Nice. Oh, great stuff, Vivek. And my understanding also is that once you're done with this process, now I know that it has to be really dried, right? Do you rinse it off first? Do you rinse the caustic off? So you'd wear plastic rubber gloves and hold it under the faucet or whatever and rinse the caustic off of it.
Correct. It needs to be quite thoroughly rinsed, because if you don't, what will happen is that the caustic salts would stick to the nano layers. And you will start to see a bit of a greening effect on the nano layer itself. It's not a big deal, but it's not ideal either. So what you want to do is rinse it off as thoroughly as possible, hang it out to dry, give it maybe a day or two. 1 day under the hot sun, you should be good to go.
Beautiful. So nice to feel us flowing into how this really gets done and developing simple methods. It's really nice to hear about and explain. Another thought I have is if a person really wanted to start experimenting with this and they could get themselves some 14 gauge wire that didn't have a coating on it. How many coils are you using in your health pens? And then I know the numbers on the Magrav coils, but we could talk about that in a minute. If somebody wanted to just even practice with a mandrel at home and even hand winding, or they can wind it with a drill, and we have some videos on that out that are a little more other details we won't get into here, but let's just talk about numbers of coils if somebody wanted to play with hand winding and create a few devices for themselves and nano coat them.
Okay, if we were to, let's look at the health pen, for example. This is my health pen, and what you see is 18 turns. Each of the coils has 18 turns. So for someone who is coming into this for the first time, what I would recommend is two coils of 18 turns each. The inner coil, I use a 6mm mandrel, and I do 18 turns around that. And on the outer coil, I use a 10mm mandrel. I do 18 turns around that. Okay, and so the inner coil slips beautifully into the outer coil, and all you need is a straight pin that goes through the both of them and is curved on the top. That's how simply you can make a health pen.
Beautiful. And do you want to just show us again really quick, Vivek, what do you do with the ends of the coils?
Okay.
And when you say a straight pin down the middle, it's basically a straight piece of 14 gauge copper wire with the top turned over so that the energy flows down. Like this. Beautiful.
I don't know whether you can see it.
Yeah, right, we can see it. Yep. Nice.
Yep. So this is how you turn the top over.
Nice.
So that's all you need. You need the straight piece of wire with the end turned like that.
And the point is just you cut it with a wire cutter or whatever, the point at the bottom. And do you cut it on an angle or do you cut it straight?
I usually cut it straight, but it doesn't really matter whether you cut it straight or an angle, because that's the point where plasma comes out.
And then how do your coils? What do you do with the ends of your coils?
You turn them back on themselves.
So at the top.
At the top.
And then at the bottom, do they twist together or just?
No, you can actually just leave one set of coils within the other. You don't even have to turn the ends back on themselves. You can just leave them as they are with that central pin running through. Only the top of the central pin is turned back on itself. The bottom is left as it is, because whatever plasma that leaks out from the two coils gets drawn into the central pin. And there's only one way that the plasma can come out of the central pin. It can't come out from the top because it's turned back onto itself. So it can only come out the bottom. And that's why each pen has a distinctive top and bottom. If you try doing something with the top, you don't feel it. But the moment you turn it around and you hold it the correct way, you will feel the wind from the pen itself. You'll feel it on your hand. For those of us who are more sensitive, you'll feel it on your hand.
Nice. Very cool. And then for the Magrav unit coils, the numbers are 81 and 140, right? Is that correct?
144.
144. So on the two smaller coils where one fits inside the other, it is 81 turns counterclockwise, right? Or whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise, they all need to be the same, but counterclockwise is preferable, right?
Correct. But, counterclockwise may be a bit confusing for most people. So what we would always say is that when you wind your coils, run the drill in reverse. That means imagine that you're using the drill to unscrew a screw from the wall. Which direction would you run it in? You would run it in reverse. Use that direction to coil your coils.
And so it's 81 for the inner set and then 144 for the outer set. And these are all multiples of 9, right?
That's right. 9 is a very, very important number. So whatever we do it in multiples of 9.
Cool and awesome. Thank you so much.
Simple. The thing I would like to ask people who are getting into it for the first time is understand why you're doing what you're doing. You know, for some people, you need to do it first before you understand. For others, you need to learn the theory before you know it makes sense in the practical. Do whatever feels more comfortable for you, but understand at the end of the day why you're doing what you're doing. Don't just, as Mr. Kesh says, monkey see, monkey do. Don't just follow because everyone else is doing it. Understand the process. Then when you start thinking about the flow of plasma, when you start visualizing how the layers are aligned such that plasma can flow in one direction and it can be reflected back in the other direction, it's all very coherent rather than the plasma going zigzag within the structure itself, then it starts making a lot of sense.
So in these plasma tools that we're learning from the Keshe Foundation and from this work at large is nano-coated copper, nano-coated coils, and then we also have GANS, which is gas in its nano state, and we have other videos on that. So those are really the two, if you learn how to make the nano-coated coils, you learn how to make your coils, and then you learn how to make GANS. Those are kind of the two working materials that we can make a lot of different items out of. And one of the neat things that happens for those of us who have GANs and these nano-coated coils in our environments is we begin feeling kind of a more peaceful plasma energy in our world. We can feel a flow. We feel it in our bodies. We feel it in the surrounding world. So besides just being able to make a Magrav unit and plug it into the refrigerator and start lowering your electric bill or getting your car to run better and use less fuel, we have the whole energetic of the plasma energy. So it's really a beautiful thing to be surrounded with and just play with. Right. I should show you, I actually just made ice blocks from let me walk in and grab these, from I'll just turn my video off a second, but I just made a couple of pens that were the very first things I made months and months and months ago. And they're very simple. And let's see, where did I set them? Here, I'll show you in just a second. And I also just put them in the freezer with ice because I love testing these things out that way. And I had a really beautiful health pen that somebody sent me that was made in a more fancy way, and I wanted to see how the ice compared. But here, let's turn this back on and see if you can see these. Can you see those? Those are like 3 original health pens that I made, and they're just very simple and just simple, simple, simple. They were really fun to make, hand wound, and then here, like here's the ice thing on one. Look at what a nice plasma field that made. Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing.
And I mean, I have a way fancier pen that made a little more dense plasma field, and then I hung 2 of them over this ice. Oops. And it made, look at that big plasma field it made. Wow. Isn't that amazing? It's so much really fun. I mean, that's simple things, but these are nano-coated. Then I even took these, according to Libby's method, and I put ash on them because we have a campfire pit here, and I just took ash out of the fire pit, and I hung them on the clothesline outside for, a week or something. So they've been through a bunch of just interesting play experiments, and I was thinking it'd be really fun to make peace, like chimes, or not even chimes, but like a wind catcher, and just hang different things like this together, and maybe even the ping pong ball with GANs in it, and then send those out around the world.
Yep, hang those out around the house. Let the fields radiate. Let the fields positively touch beings that are around those fields, not just human beings, but animals as well, children, so everyone gets the benefit.
Yes.
That's how we move forward together.
Vivek, I feel so proud of all of us and so excited to be part of this moving community that is now around the world, and all of us with our different cultures, our different languages, our different backgrounds that we come from, and we have this really amazing experience of interacting with one another, of knowing that we are one world, that it is time to lay down our weapons. It is time to lay down the control system and let it go, because it causes many to suffer and only a few to prosper. And it's time to turn all that around. This Keshe technology is a really beautiful part of that. And I would like to dedicate again this to our brother who departed this world today, Fabio, in the car accident in Italy. And just know that this work is going to be continued, that we are all honored to be practicing and playing with these tools, and to have this technology coming out to humanity in this way so that it's available to all of us. It isn't just being limited to a few in a corporation somewhere. I say in 21st Century Superhuman, we really are all one. It doesn't matter how far off the map anyone is, and you're right on, Vivek. And we are here to move forward as one, as beings of love and light, and for the good of the many. May the good of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And may we move forward together into a peaceful world, a world with abundance and plenty for all. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate the teaching that comes forth from you. It's very wise and wonderful. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.
Okay, we shall see you soon. Much love, everyone. Follow us at 21stcenturysuperhuman.com, Naturally Better TV, and keshefoundation.org. Much love. See you soon.